While most believe that animation is made strictly for kids, even though I myself have argued many times on this channel that nothing could be further from the truth, there are still a few well-known animated movies out there that are most definitely not for children. But even aside from such comedians as Adam Sandler and Seth Rogen injecting their own personal brand of R-rated humor into the world of animation to get their kicks, there are other adult-themed animated movies that show just how terrifying the medium can be when used to its fullest horrifying potential. Watership Down almost immediately comes to mind. And that's what a lot of people forget about animation. Because there are no rules or limits to what can be done, the possibilities are literally endless in any direction the animators choose to take it. But perhaps somewhat luckily, due to animation's association with children's entertainment, audiences have not been subjected to that as often as they could be. But nonetheless, as I just said, there are some notable animated movies out there that are not only not made with children in mind, but are rather terrifying to boot. And today, I'd like to go over what might just be the scariest one of them all, or at least is close to the top of that list. And spoilers will abound for the movie in question. So in case you don't want anything ruined, you might want to proceed with caution. This will be the only spoiler warning I'll be giving out. Okay, so as I touched on before, when the subject of scary, adult-themed animated movies comes up, most people are likely to immediately think of the infamous 1977 movie Watership Down. A tale of cute little bunnies trying to find a new home, while at the same time having to go through horrifying experiences, hear stories of the worst sort imaginable, and not to mention be graphically slaughtered on screen. This movie has been known to traumatize adults, so needless to say, it most certainly deserves its infamous reputation, alright. But that being said, I do believe there is another animated movie that's on the same level as Watership Down. Maybe it's not quite as bad, but it's definitely still in the same league as it. And this would be another adaptation of a famously adult novel, the 1954 adaptation of Animal Farm. Now, as I touched on in my video, Sausage Party didn't work as a religious allegory, which you can find a link in the description to. The most notable thing about Animal Farm is its impressively on-the-nose use of allegory. Anyone with even the slightest idea of what George Orwell was basing his book off of can easily see the parallels between the events and characters in his book versus what happened in real life, and what he's trying to say with it all. Really, as I said in the aforementioned video, as a writer myself, I have to admit it's actually pretty impressive the way he was able to pull that off. But his use of allegory is not what I'm here to discuss in this video. Okay, so to cut right to the chase, there is one reason, and one reason only, why this movie is animated. And that's simply due to the fact that because almost all the characters in the book are different kinds of farm animals, it would have been simply impossible for an adaptation of the book to be done in live action in 1954. There was simply no other way to adapt the story back then. But because it's animated, and in a style similar to what Disney had been using at the time, no less, it often leads many to assume the first time going in that it's just a cute little movie about a group of animals trying to run a farm. But as those same unfortunate people find out the hard way, They are very wrong about that. Because here's the thing. George Orwell wrote the book to be a parallel and allegory of what had happened in Russia after the fall of the Tsar in 1917. And because that involved a lot of bloody conquest and slaughter, that's exactly what the book depicts in order to get its point across. And the movie is no exception to this. Seriously. There are scenes from this movie ripped straight out of a nightmare when it comes to Napoleon's rise to power. And in case you don't know, Napoleon is a pig. That's Orwell's stand-in for Joseph Stalin. But the point is, you have such things as Snowball being brutally ripped apart by vicious guard dogs, thankfully off-screen, but his screams and the sound of ripping flesh leave very little to the imagination. And not to mention the infamous scene where the loyal horse boxer breaks his back and is shipped off to the glue factory while all the other animals watch in horror. And finally, a deviation from the book where all the animals rise up at the end and trample the pigs to death, all the while the guard dogs are too drunk to stop them. Now, once again, there's no actual gore, but frankly, there doesn't need to be. And that's not even getting into what might just be the worst scene in the whole movie. After Napoleon starts selling chicken eggs in exchange for goods from a local salesman, the other animals start to get fed up because the chickens had specifically been promised that wouldn't happen. So a bunch of the animals plan to stop them the next time they go to take the eggs, which results in a terrifying scene where a cat is actually ripped apart by the guard dogs on screen. But it gets worse, because after Napoleon is able to restore order, if you can call it that, he demands to know which survivors were in on the conspiracy. A few animals come forth and are quickly taken away by the guard dogs. And let me just say, the noises will terrify your nightmares. The screams combined with the inhuman shredding sounds let you know exactly what is going on. And just when you thought it couldn't get any worse, the scene then cuts to the rule wall, and specifically the law that says no animal shall kill another animal, which now has "without cause" written underneath it in blood. Now, as I've already pointed out, technically there's no gore, but the imagination more than compensates for that. In fact, the reason there isn't any gore is actually because of the era in which it was made, rather than because it was animated. Because at that time, depicting bloody violence was absolutely forbidden to show on screen. And honestly, I think the fact that it was animated allowed them to get away with more than they would have had it been a regular movie. Because I'm pretty dang sure the sign written "in blood" would not have been allowed in a live-action movie of the time. I'm not kidding when I say I've seen war movies made in the same decade that aren't nearly as violent and disturbing as this movie is. But I also think that the animation is part of why it's so horrifying and shocking. Because as I said before, the animation here easily evokes classic Disney or Looney Tunes, which are things that people automatically associate with fun, innocence, and lightheartedness. So to see all these cute farm animals be involved in graphic murder and slaughter makes everything you see, and don't see, all the more disturbing. It's almost like those creepypastas people write about children's TV shows, taking these innocent, fun shows and turning them into extremely dark tales of graphic violence and murder. And in doing that, they managed to scare their audience on a much deeper level than if they had told the exact same story using Game of Thrones. In other words, taking things that people associate with innocence in fiction and turning them into something very dark and twisted can often scare a person a lot more than something that's meant to be scary. And that's what Animal Farm manages to pull off without even trying to. By taking all these cute animals and telling an extremely dark, twisted story of greed, power, fear-mongering, and ultimate dictatorship through manipulation and slaughter, it manages to make it be all the more horrifying because of it. Because on a subconscious level, you only expect lighthearted, comical violence at most. So to see real violence, both implied and shown, with those same cute characters hits right at home on a much deeper level. It makes the impact of those moments hit a lot harder, and might even manage to scare people better than a horror movie. Basically, what I'm trying to say here is that part of the reason Animal Farm is so scary is because it's animated in the first place, and specifically in a style that evokes the likes of Disney and Looney Tunes. Because long story short, you don't expect to see actual violence and murder in those things, only comical, cartoon versions of that. So when you get a movie that not only depicts that, but does not pull its punches in doing so, like Animal Farm does, it makes it all the more horrifying. And that's a major reason why I believe Animal Farm might just be one of the scariest animated films of all time. Because it's an animated tale of a dictator's bloody rise to power. And those visuals and that story do not mix, sending it straight into the uncanny valley of movies. And I do think that's the best way to describe it. It has the visuals people associate with innocence, but it's a story that has anything but in it. And not to mention, as I said earlier, animated or not, the violence is pretty dang graphic even by today's standards. Because like I mentioned before, sometimes it's not just what you see, but also what you don't see that can make a movie extremely disturbing. And a movie like Animal Farm knows how to use that to its fullest advantage. Okay, I think I've made my point on that. So now I'd like to hear from all of you. Do you agree with me and believe that Animal Farm might just be one of the scariest animated movies ever? Or do you believe I'm wrong and that it doesn't belong anywhere near the top of that list? Please let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And as I just said, it's okay if you disagree with me. You can think that everything I said in this video is completely backwards if you wish. And unlike Napoleon would, I've got no issue with you if you do. And thank you all for watching. I very much appreciate it. And I hope to see you all next time.